They told me I couldn't bring it inside. Security stopped me at the courthouse entrance. The big, clear trash bag I was gripping with both hands, crinkling with each step I took. Inside it were torn-up photos, burned letters, a stuffed animal with a knife slashed down the middle, and one of those cheap Valentine's Day cards that still plays music even after you rip it in half. They thought I was unstable. Maybe I was. But I told them, I'm not dangerous. This is just everything I couldn't say. It took 5 minutes and a full-on supervisor call to let me through. I sat outside the courtroom on the long wooden bench for another 15, with my trash bag sitting between my knees like a dog I didn't want to let go of. Inside, she was already seated. So was he. I heard them laughing once through the door. Just once. One of those casual, we've already won kind of chuckles. That was enough. When the bailiff opened the door and said, "Mr. Pruitt," I stood, lifted my garbage bag of emotional evidence, and walked into the room like I was dragging my own broken spine behind me. I didn't look at them. Not yet. Not until I reached the table. Her attorney looked smug. Of course he did. This was routine for him. Another open-and-shut divorce case. Another pathetic man giving up the house, the savings, probably even the dog. But what he didn't know was that I hadn't come to fight over the dog, or the house, or the money. I came for the truth. And I brought receipts. Literal receipts. One of them, still inside the bag, showed a $487 hotel room 2 counties over. Charged at 2:14 p.m. on a Wednesday. The same Wednesday she said she had food poisoning and couldn't make it to her niece's recital. I was there, alone, holding her niece's hand while she looked at the door, asking, "Is Aunt Danny coming?" I told her yes, but I already knew the answer. And now, as I finally sat down and placed that bag gently on the floor beside me, I looked across the courtroom. She didn't smile, but he did. Thatcher. Yeah, that's really his name. Sounds like a dude who smells like Axe and yells at customer service reps. Gave me the tiniest smirk. A flick of his cheek that said, "You lost, man. She's with me now." And for the first time in months, I smiled back. Because he had no idea what was about to happen. The envelope had already been submitted to the judge. I submitted it 3 days ago, quietly, without warning, without drama. Inside, not just evidence of the affair, but a sworn affidavit from her employer, detailing how she billed over 120 hours on the company card in hotels, restaurants, and spa treatments while clocked in for work-from-home shifts. A corporate investigation was already underway, and if the judge ruled in my favor, she wouldn't just lose the case. She'd lose her job, her severance, and her chance at full custody. I wasn't here to win her back. I was here to show the court who she really was, beneath the perfect eyeliner and charity smile. And this garbage bag? This was just the opening act. The judge squinted at the envelope like it was a puzzle he hadn't solved yet. It had been sitting on his desk for a full 5 minutes before he even mentioned it. His nameplate read, Honorable Barrett L. Grimly, and I swear I couldn't make up a name more fitting. He had the demeanor of a tired mechanic, like he'd seen one too many broken engines and didn't care whose fault it was anymore. "Mr. Pruitt," he finally said, peering at me over his glasses, "I've reviewed the materials you submitted on Monday. It's substantial. Would you like to have your counsel speak on your behalf?" I cleared my throat and leaned into the mic. "I'm representing myself, Your Honor." There it was, the first crack in the room's smug little atmosphere. Juniper turned, slowly, as if hearing my voice for the first time in weeks. She didn't even look angry. She looked puzzled. Thatcher leaned forward, still trying to read me like I was a crossword puzzle missing its last clue. I didn't blame them. I hadn't spoken to her since she served me the divorce papers in a Chipotle parking lot. No, seriously. That's where she handed them to me. I had guacamole in one hand and a fountain drink in the other. She walked up, dropped the manila envelope onto my table, kissed me on the forehead, and walked away. She said nothing. Not a word. Just a kiss, cold and robotic, like she was shutting down a laptop. So no, I didn't feel bad when I handed the judge a folder filled with company emails, invoice discrepancies, calendar entries, and video evidence showing the two of them sneaking in and out of her office building at hours no one should be working. I believe the materials speak for themselves. I said into the mic, my voice steadier than I expected. But I'd also like to request that the court consider delaying the financial judgment until the outcome of the ongoing workplace investigation is determined. The opposing attorney stood so fast he knocked over his legal pad. "Objection, Your Honor," This is an ambush. Sit down, Mr. Graves. Judge grimly cut him off. I'll be the one deciding what's admissible, not you. The silence that followed was heavier than anything I've felt in my life. Not at my father's funeral. Not the day I moved into the guest bedroom. Not even the day I found her spare toothbrush at the bottom of Thatcher's gym bag. This silence was anticipation, the kind that makes your ears ring. Juniper finally spoke. Wendell, she said, her voice soft and careful, like she was talking to a child who'd just knocked over a vase. This isn't going to change anything. It's too late for revenge. I told you this divorce could be peaceful. I almost laughed. Peaceful? Like the way she changed her Netflix password and removed me from the account the same night she told me she needed space. Like the way she drained our vacation savings to pay for a couple's retreat to Oregon with him? Like the way she told our friends I had emotionally checked out first? No, Juniper. There would be no peaceful exit. Because I had more than just paperwork. That bag beside me. It held a printed copy of a joint savings account transfer, $12,300 gone in one day, routed to a mystery account 3 weeks before she filed. I had audio, captured on a baby monitor she didn't realize I'd left in the guest room, of her planning to take our dog Scout and tell the court he always hated Wendell. But most of all, I had time. I'd spent 6 months being quiet, pretending, nodding, making her believe I was falling apart, while behind the scenes, I became a one-man surveillance unit. She thought she broke me, but in reality, she handed me the script for her own downfall. The judge didn't say anything for a long time, just flipped through pages. The kind of flipping that sounds louder in an old courtroom with bad acoustics. Page after page of her secrets landing like little grenades on the bench. And then he sighed. That long, judicial sigh of someone who's seen too many liars wearing nice shoes. Mrs. Pruitt, he said, I think it would be in your best interest to have a private conversation with your counsel before we proceed. Thatcher leaned toward her, whispering something. She swatted his arm away. The room wasn't laughing anymore. And the bag? It still wasn't empty. When Judge Grimley recessed the court for 15 minutes, the room shifted. The mood, which started as light, confident, smug even, had gone stale. No more giggles from the other side of the aisle. No whispers. Just her lawyer whispering angrily now, jaw clenched, as Juniper sat there, lips pressed so tight she looked like she was trying to hold in a scream. Thatcher was pretending to scroll through his phone, but I saw it. The way his knee kept bouncing under the table, the way his thumb wasn't even touching the screen. That man was sweating bullets in a climate-controlled room. I stayed in my seat while others stepped out. Didn't need air. I had all the oxygen I needed in the bag by my feet. My hands were shaking, but not from nerves. It was adrenaline, that strange, jittery electricity that lives in your chest when you know you're not crazy anymore. When you finally feel believed. I unzipped the bag. It made a soft, tearing noise. The kind of noise you barely notice, unless everyone around you is sitting in silence, waiting to see what comes out first. I reached in and pulled out a ribbon-tied box. No one reacted. It looked harmless. A soft pink box, like a small bakery cake container. Juniper knew what it was the second she saw it, and her face dropped. Funny, really. The woman once told me she couldn't cry in public because it made her feel like she was letting strangers in. Yet here she was, blinking rapidly like someone had just sliced onions in front of her. The box was the exact one she gave me for my birthday 2 years ago. Inside had been a folded, handwritten note that read, "To my favorite person, the only one who's ever really seen me." I kept it. Of course I kept it. Pathetic, right? But what she didn't know was that I found a second note in the same drawer later. One she meant to throw away, but didn't. Same handwriting. Same paper. But this one said, "To my favorite person, I wish I'd met you before I ever met Wendell." It was addressed to Thatcher. I didn't say anything. Just opened the box. Slowly. The paper crinkled inside like it knew its time had come. I slid both notes onto the table, the love note for me, and the one meant for her secret lover. I had laminated them. For the court, of course. That's when Juniper finally stood up. "Your Honor," she blurted, loud enough for everyone to hear, even though we were still in recess. "He's emotionally unwell. He's doing this to humiliate me." I smiled at the judge, then held up the second note. "If documenting the truth is emotional instability, then I guess I'm unwell, Your Honor." Judge Grimley didn't flinch. "Mrs. Pruitt," If you disrupt proceedings again during recess, I'll have the bailiff escort you to the witness room. Please sit down. I could see it in her eyes now, not anger, not guilt, panic. It was the first time since the affair started, since I knew, that I felt any power in this relationship. And I hated that it had to happen in a courtroom, that this was the only place where the lies finally mattered. I leaned back, reached into the bag again. This time I pulled out something less dramatic, a USB stick. Small, black, marked only with one word in silver Sharpie, June. Because that's when it happened. That's when she told me she was taking a weekend away to clear her head. That's when I watched her location on Find My iPhone jump from our hometown to a boutique in 3 hours away. A place where no one cleared their head. A place where people went to start new ones. The USB held 3 hours of dashcam footage. My buddy Gavin lent me his Jeep that weekend, parked outside the inn, left it running. It recorded Juniper walking into the inn with a duffel bag, then Thatcher entering the same door 6 minutes later. It also recorded the two of them walking out the next morning, holding hands, Thatcher giving her a forehead kiss, the exact same kiss she used to give me before leaving for work. I never confronted her with it. Not until now. I set the USB stick on the table and watched Juniper shrink into herself. She looked like a woman unzipping her own skin and realizing there was nothing underneath. Recess was ending. The bailiff called the court back to order. I didn't look at her this time. I was focused on the judge, because next, he'd open the file that didn't just contain proof of cheating. It contained contracts. Ones I never signed. Ones with my forged signature, used to quietly retitle the lake house into her name. Fraud. She hadn't just betrayed our marriage. She had committed a felony. And the judge? He was about to read every word out loud. The air shifted the moment Judge Grimley picked up the forged contract. You could feel it in the courtroom, the way everyone leaned in just a little, as if the next 5 seconds were about to decide whether this was still a divorce hearing or the prelude to something much worse. He took his time, adjusting his glasses, eyes tracing the page with the kind of slow precision only old-school men in positions of power seemed to possess. His finger tapped the signature at the bottom. Mine. Except it wasn't. It was a shaky replica, a poor imitation of the cursive I'd perfected in the 7th grade and never changed since. Mr. Pruitt, he said slowly, voice even, tone unreadable. Is this your signature? I looked him straight in the eye. No, Your Honor. It's not. Have you ever seen this document before today? I hadn't, until I found it inside a drawer in the guest bedroom, the one I've been sleeping in for 6 months. It was inside a folder labeled Boat Insurance. Juniper's lawyer started to object, but Grimley held up a hand before a single word left his mouth. And what is this document in your understanding, Mr. Pruitt? Grimley asked, flipping to the back page with a sound like a gavel hitting softwood. It's a quitclaim deed, Your Honor. One that legally transfers ownership of our jointly purchased lake house to Juniper Pruitt alone. The judge nodded slowly. Then he turned to her. Mrs. Pruitt, how do you respond to this accusation of document forgery? She froze. Not like in the movies. No gasps, no sudden tears. Just silence, cold and brittle. Her shoulders tensed, lips parted like she was about to say something, but no words came out. Her lawyer whispered something furiously in her ear, but she waved him off. Her mouth opened again, and all she said was, I thought he signed it. Lies. But not bold ones. The kind meant to leave just enough space for doubt. The judge narrowed his eyes. You thought he signed it? I left it on the counter. He said he'd take care of it. I assumed. I never saw that paper in my life. I cut in, no longer needing to be gentle. She used my digital signature from our tax forms. We had a PDF on the desktop. It was open source. No encryption. She had access. That file was still on our shared computer until last week. Her lawyer finally spoke, voice tight, controlled rage under a polite mask. Your Honor, if we're going to derail proceedings into criminal allegations, I'd request a continuance and private arbitration. Denied, Grimley said instantly, setting the paper down. Not when the evidence is in front of me. If this is legitimate forgery, and all signs point that way, I'm not sweeping it into a corner so the parties can privately resolve it. I'm opening an inquiry. That was the moment. The first true crack in her mask. Juniper's breath caught. Her eyes darted to Thatcher. He didn't look at her. He was suddenly very interested in the pattern of the carpet under his leather shoes. The silence between them said more than if they had screamed at each other across the courtroom. That's when I knew. He didn't know about the forgery either. She had done this alone, to protect herself. From him, from me, from the life she built on a cliff made of sand. And now, it was collapsing. The judge called for a second recess. He said he needed to speak with Chambers, but I knew he was about to consult with the court's criminal review liaison. This wasn't just divorce anymore. It was crossing into fraud, perjury, and possibly financial misconduct under marital law. As everyone stood to exit, I remained seated. I wasn't done. I have more to submit, I said quietly to the clerk, handing her the second sealed envelope I'd prepared. If that's allowed. She looked at the judge. He nodded without a word. That envelope? It wasn't just about the money or the house. It contained the signed testimony of a woman named Monica Landry. A woman Juniper fired last year from her freelance illustration agency, claiming performance issues. But what really happened? Monica found emails between Juniper and a certain married client. That client being the CEO of a company that just awarded her a six-figure commission job. Emails that described rendering services off the clock and bonus time together at the lake. Monica reached out to me 2 weeks ago. She had screenshots, dates, hotel receipts paid through the company account. I didn't tell Juniper I knew, because every villain thinks the silence is surrender, when really, it's a setup. As we exited the courtroom, I walked behind her and Thatcher, close enough to hear her hiss under her breath. You said he was weak. Thatcher didn't reply. He just kept walking, jaw clenched, fists curled at his sides. Maybe for the first time, he was realizing she was capable of more damage than even he signed up for. I smiled again, not out of pettiness, not even revenge, but because after months of being the guy on the floor, I had finally stood up, and the room was starting to tilt in my direction. And I wasn't done yet. Not even close. I didn't go to the cafeteria during the second recess. I didn't want a stale bagel or burnt courthouse coffee. I wanted to sit, alone, still. I leaned back in that hard wooden bench, closed my eyes, and replayed it all. Not just the lies, but the little humiliations, the slow deaths, the birthday party where she forgot the cake and left me sitting in front of my own friends while she disappeared for 3 hours. The Christmas morning where I unwrapped a candle and a voucher for a dinner that never happened, while I gave her a necklace she later claimed she was allergic to. The allergy didn't stop her from giving it to her sister a month later, who posted it on Instagram with the caption, "For my amazing future brother-in-law." Thatcher. Again. You see, betrayal doesn't usually come with a bang. It comes like slow poison in the water, until one day, you're coughing blood and wondering when the bleeding started. When the judge came back, the room was quieter. He didn't sit this time, just stood beside his bench, holding the second envelope. He looked heavier, like the weight of what he'd read had physically pressed on his spine. "Mrs. Pruitt," he said calmly, "before we resume formal proceedings, I'd like to give you the opportunity to speak with your counsel regarding the contents of this envelope. It contains witness testimony, correspondence, and potential corporate ethics violations involving one of your clients. You are under no obligation to respond now. However, I must inform you this court is legally bound to report what may be active misconduct within a contracted enterprise." Juniper's lawyer turned pale. The man looked like he'd been slapped with a wet glove in front of the queen. He whispered something to her again, longer this time, while she just sat there, frozen, staring at the floor like it had something to say that could save her. She didn't cry, not yet, but her mouth twitched, the way it used to when she was on the verge of snapping. The way it did that night she threw a wine glass at the wall and told me I was too small for the life she wanted. I remember asking her what that meant. She never explained. The judge returned to the bench. And just like that, the hearing resumed, as if we hadn't just blown a hole through the walls of her public persona. But I wasn't finished. "Your Honor," I said softly, "may I approach with one more exhibit?" He blinked slowly. "Mr. Pruitt, the rules of evidence. This one doesn't need to be submitted. Just played. It's for the court's awareness." I lifted a small device from my bag. A cheap, plastic baby monitor receiver, the same one I'd left plugged into the wall in the guest room, 2 feet from the door she never knocked on. She thought I moved into that room because I was being dramatic. She didn't know I was recording. Not until 3 weeks later. By then, it was too late. I pressed play. The audio was staticky at first, then cleared. Her voice came through first. "I know. I know he's not going to do anything. He's spineless. You could literally set fire to his socks, and he'd ask if you needed a lighter. Laughter. Then Thatcher's voice. Slurred slightly. Tipsy, probably. We should just start moving things out. What's he going to do? Cry into a spreadsheet. More laughter. Juniper again. You know what's sad? He actually thinks I feel guilty. He doesn't get it. I mourned this marriage 2 years ago. Now I'm just waiting for the paperwork. Then, a pause. Then, her again, quieter. But don't mention the lake house in front of him, okay? He still thinks he's on the deed. Click. Silence. No music. No soundtrack. Just the truth, echoing in a room that was never supposed to hear it. Judge Grimley didn't react with theatrics. No banging gavel. No outraged gasp. He just stared forward, into the kind of distance only judges know, where the human drama becomes numbers and statutes and consequences. Juniper looked gutted. This wasn't anger anymore. This wasn't control slipping. This was collapse. Thatcher stood up suddenly. I didn't know he was recording. No one asked you to speak. Grimley snapped without looking at him. I think I need to speak to someone, Thatcher said again, louder now. But this time it was directed at Juniper. You said it was done. You said you handled the paperwork. Sit down. Grimley's voice could have split granite. Thatcher sat. Juniper didn't move. Not even her eyes. She stared at me now. But not with hate. Not even with fear. It was something worse. Recognition. That slow, creeping horror of realizing the man you once dismissed as soft, predictable, spineless, had just outplayed you at a game you didn't even know he was playing. I sat back in my chair and let the silence breathe. Not to rub it in, but because finally, it was hers to sit in, and I still hadn't opened the last file. The one with the prenup clause she forgot existed. The one that made adultery financially devastating. I didn't even mean to bring the prenup. It was at the bottom of the file box in my trunk, tucked between old mortgage documents and the warranty for a blender we'd never used. I wasn't even sure I'd find it in time, but the night before the hearing, I stayed up until 3:17 a.m., combing through every manila folder I owned, until I finally pulled out the dusty envelope marked draft, prenup, not signed. At first glance, I thought it was worthless, just the old draft we never finished before the wedding. But inside it was a second copy. Signed, notarized, dated, and binding. We signed it quietly 1 week before the wedding. Juniper's father insisted on it. Back then, he had money, owned a small chain of hardware stores. He thought I was creative but financially inconsistent. I was a freelance data analyst with a Hyundai and a cat. Not exactly a Wall Street catch. So he had his lawyer draw it up. Juniper didn't even read it, just rolled her eyes and said, "If it makes him sleep better, I'll sign it." The irony? He went bankrupt 3 years later. But the prenup? Still valid. Still active. Still loaded with Clause 14b. A clause she either never read or forgot existed entirely. Your Honor, I said calmly as court resumed, before we proceed to division of assets, I'd like to reintroduce this document, now verified and notarized, entered into evidence as Exhibit K. Grimley looked down at the paperwork the clerk had handed him. He adjusted his glasses and read the cover page aloud. Prenuptial agreement between Wendell Pruitt and Juniper Allen Sweeney, dated June 10, 2014. Notarized by Ruth Delgado, State of Delaware. Filed under joint consent. Juniper's head tilted, like she just heard a song she didn't recognize but should. Her lawyer stiffened. Your Honor, I object. This document wasn't disclosed during preliminary disclosures and was not presented during financial discovery. Grimley looked at him flatly. Then perhaps you should have asked your client if one existed. Silence. A rare, pure silence, like the kind that happens in a church after someone drops a wine glass. The judge kept reading. Clause 14b. In the event of extramarital infidelity by either party, and where said infidelity is supported by material evidence, the offending party forfeits all claim to shared real estate, spousal support, and residual profits stemming from joint business ventures. Juniper's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. Wendell, she whispered. We never enforced that. That was for appearances. No, I said without raising my voice. You never thought I'd remember it. She stood up then, not in a rage, not to yell, but like someone who needed to stand to keep from collapsing. I watched her hand shake as she gripped the edge of the table. I was 25 when I signed that, she said, her voice cracking. I didn't even read it. That's not my fault, I replied. You told me once that ignorance doesn't excuse betrayal. That was the moment Thatcher stood up too, not out of loyalty, but self-preservation. He wasn't her knight. He wasn't going down with her. I think I should leave, he muttered to no one in particular. Grimley didn't look up. If you are not a named party in this hearing, Mr. What's your last name again? Crane, he mumbled. Then you may leave. And just like that, Thatcher walked out of the courtroom and out of her corner. He didn't look back. Didn't even brush her hand when she reached toward him. His loyalty, it seemed, had an expiration date. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I didn't enjoy it the way I thought I would. I just sat there watching the woman who once shared my toothbrush holder now realize she would walk away with nothing she thought she owned. Not the house. Not the business. Not the car I still paid for. Not even Scout, the dog she claimed was hers but had been registered in my name since day one. She turned to the judge, her voice suddenly small, unfamiliar. Can't we negotiate something? I made mistakes, but this was my life too. Grimley's response was calm, methodical. You had the opportunity to negotiate during mediation. Instead, you attempted to deceive this court, misrepresent ownership, and potentially commit signature fraud. This agreement may be outdated, but it is enforceable, and the evidence submitted today clearly satisfies the infidelity clause. She sat down, hard, no longer proud, no longer composed, just wrecked. And as she lowered her head, probably for the first time in years, I realized something painful. I didn't hate her. I didn't want revenge. I wanted closure. And this was the closest thing I would ever get. But it wasn't over yet. There was still one final hearing date to finalize the terms. And I already knew what I was going to do. Something unexpected. Something she'd never see coming. Not after all this. The date of the final hearing felt like a finish line I never thought I'd reach. It had rained that morning, the kind of cold drizzle that turns every sidewalk into a mirror. My tie was damp. My hands were shaking, not from nerves this time, but from adrenaline I hadn't burned off. I barely slept the night before. Not because I was afraid of losing, but because I didn't know what winning would even feel like. The courtroom was half full. No family. No friends. No one cheering from the sidelines. Just Juniper, her lawyer, now noticeably less smug, the same clerk, the same tired judge, and me. Even Thatcher didn't show. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that he'd packed up and moved out of her apartment 3 days after the last hearing. Said he didn't sign up for court battles and legal messes. I doubt she even fought to keep him. She looked different that day, smaller somehow. Her makeup was lighter, her hair tied back, no rings on her fingers. Her eyes had that dull shine people wear when the fight has been drained out of them, when there's nothing left to win. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just nodded once when our eyes met, and she nodded back. A silent, empty acknowledgement. Nothing more. The judge reviewed everything quickly. Efficient. Brutal. The property would remain in my name. The business, which she had tried to claim partial ownership of, would revert to sole proprietorship, mine. Her request for spousal support was denied based on Clause 14b of the prenup. All her motions had been denied. The only thing left to decide was whether I wanted to pursue legal charges regarding the forged signature on the Lake House document. Mr. Pruitt, Judge Grimley said, his voice low but direct, do you wish to press criminal charges regarding the alleged forgery? Every eye turned to me. This was the moment. The one I had dreamed about. The chance to finally put the nail in the coffin. End it all. Make her carry the stain of her own lies into every job interview, every apartment application, every courtroom for the rest of her life. And I opened my mouth. But instead of the word yes, I said something else. I'd like to make a statement instead. The judge leaned back, clearly annoyed. Mr. Pruitt, this is not the time for theatrics. You've made your case and won on every point. It's not theatrics, Your Honor. It's closure. He studied me, then gave a slight nod. Proceed. I stood up slowly. My knees cracked as I did. A reminder that time had been passing through all of this, even while I was stuck in emotional quicksand. I looked directly at Juniper. I came into this courtroom wanting justice. Not because you cheated. That hurt, yeah? But because you tried to erase me. Quietly. Paper by paper. Lie by lie. You looked me in the eyes and pretended to love me while you were building an escape plan behind my back. And I let it happen because I didn't want to believe it. I wanted the version of you I met at the aquarium, not the one who forged my name on a deed like I was already dead. She blinked hard. Once. Twice. But I didn't stop. But I've realized something in the months since this started. I don't need revenge. I don't need you punished. I just needed you to know, truly know, that I was never the fool. You were. You thought love was leverage. You thought patience was weakness. You thought silence meant I was too broken to fight back. But all it meant was that I was waiting, watching. And when the moment came, I was ready. I paused. I won't press charges. A gasp from her lawyer. A flinch from Juniper. The judge raised an eyebrow. Are you sure about that, Mr. Pruitt? Yes, Your Honor. I don't want to carry her crimes with me. I've got enough weight already. I sat back down. The silence was thick, not with tension, but confusion. They didn't understand. They never would. Because letting go is the kind of victory no one claps for. Judge grimly nodded once and moved to finalize the decree. But just before he could strike the gavel, I raised my hand one last time. There's one more thing, Your Honor. He looked like he was about to protest, but instead sighed and gestured for me to speak. I'd like to transfer ownership of Scout, our dog, to Mrs. Pruitt. Juniper's eyes snapped to mine. I held her gaze. She raised him more than I did. And despite everything, he loves her. Dogs don't care about contracts. They care about walks and treats and warm blankets. Let her have that. I don't want to win everything. There it was, the last crack in her. A tear slipped out. Not a dramatic breakdown. Just one, lonely tear. The kind you cry when someone gives you something you didn't earn. The courtroom went still. Judge grimly cleared his throat and added the note to the decree. Then, finally, brought down the gavel. Divorce finalized, he said flatly. We're adjourned. It was over. Except, it wasn't. Because when we stepped outside, and she passed me on the way to the parking lot, she stopped for just a second. Looked me in the eye with something like regret. Or shame. Or something in between. Why didn't you destroy me? She asked quietly. I didn't hesitate. Because that would have made me like you. And with that, I walked away. But it still wasn't the end. Because back home, waiting in my inbox, was an unread email. Sent from an anonymous address. Subject line, you don't know the whole story. And that changed everything. I stared at the email for 20 minutes before opening it. Just the subject line alone, you don't know the whole story, was enough to send my pulse hammering like a warning bell. I hovered my mouse over the delete button more than once. But curiosity is a cruel animal. Especially when you've been lied to before. Especially when there's even a 1% chance the final thread of the story hasn't been pulled yet. So I clicked. Inside was a single paragraph. No greeting. No name. Just this. Check the shared Dropbox folder you forgot to disconnect. She uploaded voice memos there. You'll want the one dated March 14th, 2:12 a.m. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. I didn't recognize the sender. The address was scrambled, one of those burner accounts people use when they don't want to be found. Still, I logged into the old Dropbox. I hadn't used it in months, not since we stopped collaborating on design templates for her freelance work. But sure enough, the folder was still shared, still active, and inside, a voice memo. March 14th, 2:12 a.m. I hit play. It was Juniper. Her voice sounded raw, hoarse, almost like she'd been crying. The recording began mid-sentence. Don't even know why I'm recording this. Maybe I just need to hear myself say it. Maybe I need proof that I still have a conscience. I didn't mean for things to go this far. I didn't mean to hurt him. I thought Thatcher was an escape hatch. I thought he would make me feel alive again. But he doesn't. He makes me feel empty. And Wendell didn't deserve this. He was steady. He was kind. And I treated that like weakness because I didn't want to admit I was the broken one. There was silence for a moment. Then a shuddering breath. I never stopped loving him. I just stopped loving myself. And when you can't stand who you are, you start destroying anything that reflects who you used to be. That's what I did. And now I don't even recognize the person in the mirror. If he ever hears this, I hope he knows. I'm sorry. Not because I lost. Not because I got caught. But because I forgot what love looks like until it was too late to deserve it. Click. The recording ended. I sat back in my chair and closed my eyes. It didn't fix anything. It didn't undo the betrayal or return the months I'd spent unraveling in silence. But it gave me something I didn't know I needed. Truth. Not filtered through lawyers or glares or courtroom transcripts. Just honesty. Messy. Quiet. Real. And with that, I let it go. All of it. I moved out of the house a month later. Bought a small, sunlit condo near the edge of town. Nothing fancy, just mine. I started consulting full-time again. I picked up woodworking on weekends. I even signed up for a community cooking class, where I learned how to make decent risotto and, surprisingly, met some of the best people I've ever known. And one night, 6 months after the court date, I went to a jazz bar downtown, the kind of place that smells like old leather and bourbon, and struck up a conversation with a woman named Mara. She laughed at my terrible Miles Davis impression. She called me out on my self-deprecating jokes. And when I told her I wasn't ready for anything serious, she smiled and said, "Good. Neither am I. Let's just eat pie and talk about bad movies." That night, for the first time in a long time, I went home not thinking about what I'd lost, but about what I hadn't yet found. So no, this isn't a story about revenge. It's a story about recovery. About refusing to stay broken, even when someone shatters you quietly. About realizing that sometimes the best way to win is to walk away without dragging the pieces behind you. I'm Wendell. I was cheated on. I was lied to. And somehow, I still came out of it with a better version of myself than the one she left behind. That's enough.